When you think about buying a home, your mind usually goes straight to, well, the excitement of it all.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge milestone.
Right. It's this culturally celebrated thing. You picture yourself walking through the front door of the new place, um, maybe analyzing the crown molding, or just imagining where your couch is going to fit. It feels like a fresh start.
It really does.
But if you flip that perspective for just a second and put yourself in the shoes of the real estate agent showing you that property,
Oh.
the reality shifts completely.
It's a totally different dynamic.
Exactly. For the agent, the daily requirement of the job basically boils down to agreeing to meet total strangers, often entirely alone, inside vacant, unsecured houses.
Yeah, and it's a profound vulnerability. It's so deeply baked into the profession that honestly, society rarely even pauses to acknowledge it.
We really don't.
As consumers, we just expect constant accessibility. We expect a friendly smile, immediate communication, and we expect that agent to be waiting for us alone at the property the moment we decide we want to see it. The whole business model is built on just, removing barriers between the professional and the public. It's late September of 2014, just outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Beverly Carter is 50 years old. She's a highly successful, well-known agent in her community.
Very established.
Exactly. She tells her husband she's heading out to show a house to a prospective buyer in a somewhat rural area. And by all accounts, it's just a completely standard evening for her.
Right. Totally routine.
She plans to show the house, pick up some dinner on the way home, and just go about her normal family life. But she never returns.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the setup that led Beverly to that house is chillingly calculated. It reveals so much about how criminals exploit professional obligations.
It really does. We're looking at two perpetrators here, Aaron Lewis and Crystal Lowry. And, their motive wasn't some complex personal vendetta. It was born out of sheer, desperate financial ruin.
Yeah, they are in a bad spot.
Very bad. Their circumstances were just entirely unstable. They got married in April of 2014, but by August, so just 4 months later, the relationship was completely fractured. They were separated.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, and they were severely strapped for cash. Crystal was a nursing student at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and she basically wanted Aaron out of her house.
Understandable, given the situation.
Right, but the problem was Aaron had absolutely no money to his name, no apparent means of sustaining himself. So to solve this immediate financial crisis, they hatched a plan to target someone for a ransom.
A ransom. That's quite a leap.
It is. And the specific criteria they decided on was crucial. They needed to find a married person who worked alone.
Which makes sense in a twisted way. If you need a ransom, you need someone who presumably has access to wealth, right? But you also need someone who isolates themselves voluntarily.
Exactly.
And that criteria leads a predator directly to the real estate industry.
But they didn't just pick a random agent out of a phone book, did they?
No, they didn't. They weaponized the very marketing tools agents are told they must use to be successful. They went online and cyber-stalked Beverly to make their choice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they spent time scouring her public-facing Facebook profile. And based on what they saw, the way she presented her business, her professional image, her visible successes, they concluded she was a, quote, rich broker.
So they assumed she had money.
Right. They made the assumption she was wealthy enough that her husband would readily pay a substantial ransom and accessible enough that they could easily lure her into an isolated environment.
It's essentially like a highly elaborate real-world phishing scam. A digital phishing scam works by exploiting your inherent trust in a familiar system, like a bank or a software provider. That's a really good comparison.
Here, Aaron and Crystal exploited the professional mandate of the real estate industry itself. They knew an agent's default setting is to accommodate the client. So how do they finally lure her in?
Well, they fabricated an entire reality to make Beverly think she was just doing her job. They used fake names. They created matching email addresses to correspond with her over several days.
Wow, so they put some real effort into the illusion.
They really did. They even spoofed a phone number to make it look like they were a married couple relocating from out of town, needing to buy a property quickly. And the bait they ultimately used to get her to a specific location was the promise of an all-cash buyer.
An all-cash buyer. Yeah, that's the golden ticket.
Exactly. They arranged to meet Beverly at a foreclosed, vacant home that was known locally to have issues with squatters and vandalism. But the geography of that choice is important. The property was located very close to Beverly's own home.
You often hear that described as giving the victim a false sense of security because it was in her own neighborhood, on her own turf.
Right, that familiar territory.
But I'd argue the real blind spot here was the bait itself.
Yeah.
In a commission-based job, an all-cash offer from a relocating couple is the ultimate prize. It is the exact scenario agents dream of.
Oh, absolutely. It clouds your judgment.
That promise of a seamless, lucrative transaction actively overrides a professional's internal alarm system regarding, say, the location's history of vandalism.
Yeah, you just focus on the sale.
So Beverly arrives at the property believing she is meeting a husband and wife. But the wife never shows up, only Aaron is there. And instead of a standard showing, Aaron kidnaps her. He binds her with duct tape and forces her into the trunk of his car.
It is a total violent subversion of an everyday professional interaction. But, this is where the narrative shifts from a calculated setup into a completely chaotic escalation.
Because it definitely wasn't a perfect crime.
Far from it. While they managed the initial abduction, this was not some flawlessly executed master plan. It was a sloppily conceived ransom scheme that began unraveling almost the moment Beverly was in the trunk.
Right, because with the primary objective achieved, their sheer incompetence just took over. I mean, their intended holding location fell through immediately.
It did. Their original plan was to hold Beverly at a concrete plant in a town called Cabot. Aaron actually used to work at this facility, so he knew the layout and assumed it would be deserted.
Makes sense for a hideout.
But when they arrived, there were unexpected schedule changes at the plant. People were working, machinery was operating, and the location was entirely compromised. They couldn't use it to hold a hostage.
So, with their primary location ruined, they are suddenly forced into a highly risky improvisation. Because they're driving around with a victim bound in their trunk, which usually dictates that criminals have to retreat to familiar territory, regardless of the exposure risk.
Exactly what happened. They retreated directly to Crystal's home in Jacksonville. They brought Beverly inside and kept her bound in a bathroom.
Just in the house.
Yeah. And while Aaron tried to figure out a backup plan to salvage the ransom demand, Crystal actively participated by standing guard over Beverly, holding a stun gun to ensure she didn't try to escape.
Which leads to the fatal turning point of the entire crime.
Yeah.
Because Aaron realizes he made a massive operational error at the vacant house, didn't he?
He did. A huge mistake. He left Beverly's purse and bank card behind in her vehicle, so he decides he needs to drive back to the scene of the kidnapping to retrieve them.
Which is so reckless.
Extremely. But what he doesn't account for is the speed of the response from Beverly's family. Her husband knew her schedule intimately. When she didn't come home for dinner and didn't answer her phone, he didn't just wait around, he immediately sounded the alarm.
He knew something was wrong.
Right. And the police traced her last phone communication, which was with Aaron's spoofed number, and they zeroed in on that vacant house incredibly fast. So when Aaron arrives back at the foreclosed property to get the purse, he sees law enforcement already actively canvassing the area. The police are everywhere.
Oh, wow. I mean, the psychological snap in that moment must have been absolute. The motive instantly shifts from extracting a ransom to sheer survival panic.
Completely. Because they hadn't concealed their identities from her, Beverly had been looking right at Aaron's face this whole time.
And even worse for Crystal, who had been trying to stay somewhat in the background, Beverly had been held captive in her bathroom.
Yes, and Crystal suddenly panicked because she realized Beverly could have easily seen her real name printed on the prescription medication bottle sitting on the bathroom counter.
That is just, it's a sloppy ransom plot spiraling so far out of control, they knew they were going to be caught.
That specific detail, the realization that they were entirely identifiable, is what pushed them over the edge. The ransom plot was dead. They knew they were exposed and believed their only option left to avoid prison was to eliminate the sole witness.
It is deeply disturbing to see how quickly greed metastasizes into murder just out of sloppy self-preservation panic.
It is a grim reality. So, deciding they needed to get rid of Beverly, Aaron and Crystal went out to a local store and bought a shovel and topsoil.
It's just awful.
It really is. Aaron tied Beverly's hands behind her back, and then, in a horrific act, he wrapped her face in multiple layers of duct tape to suffocate her.
My God.
They placed her body in the car and drove back to that Cabot concrete plant, the original location they meant to use for the ransom, and buried her in a shallow grave. And the sources explicitly note that Crystal held the flashlight while Aaron dug the grave and buried her.
But that same sloppy panic that led to the murder also guaranteed they wouldn't get away with it.
That's right.
Because the physical evidence left behind, combined with modern technology, made the police investigation almost immediately successful.
The unraveling of their partnership happened rapidly. Law enforcement utilized cell phone tower data to track movements, linking Aaron to the locations. And when police eventually secured Aaron's phone, they found a 12-second audio recording of Beverly on the device.
Just sitting right there on his phone.
Yes, permanently tying him to the victim during the time of her disappearance. So Aaron was arrested on September 29th, merely days after the kidnapping. And almost immediately, his self-preservation instincts kicked in again. He initially tried to deflect the blame onto a man he named as Trevor.
So he throws out a generic name, clearly trying to buy time or muddy the waters.
Yeah.
But the police saw right through a baseless deflection like that.
Oh, absolutely. The individual named Trevor was quickly investigated and entirely cleared of any suspicion. The police recognized it as a stalling tactic. Shortly after, in October, the evidence led them to arrest Crystal Lowry as well.
And Crystal, facing the reality of her involvement, fundamentally changed the trajectory of the prosecution.
She did. You have to remember, Crystal was a nursing student. She was educated enough to quickly comprehend the absolute severity of facing capital murder charges and a potential death penalty. So in July of 2015, she takes a plea deal to save her own life.
A self-serving move, for sure.
Definitely. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping, receiving a 30-year sentence. And just as a brief side note on her status, she actually applied for clemency in 2020 to try and reduce that sentence to 15 years.
Wait, really? Did it work?
No, the parole board firmly denied it, so she won't be eligible for parole until 2035. But the crucial caveat to her 30-year deal was her legal agreement to testify fully against Aaron.
Right. So how does Aaron possibly mount a defense against his own wife's testimony? Plus the cell phone data placing him at the scene and audio of the victim on his phone. I mean, he couldn't just deny being involved.
He couldn't. He had to invent a narrative that accounted for his physical presence with Beverly and her subsequent death. And that necessity led to one of the most brazen victim-blaming defense strategies imaginable.
What did he claim?
Aaron's defense strategy was to claim that he and Beverly were actually engaged in a secret consensual affair.
You're kidding.
No. He claimed she came over to his house willingly for sex and that she died accidentally during the encounter. His defense attorney attempted to introduce reasonable doubt by arguing in court that people dealing with financial and marital stress sometimes make unreasonable decisions.
That is just vile.
It was an attempt to imply it was plausible that Beverly, a successful married woman, would initiate an affair with Aaron. He even took the stand himself in his own defense. He admitted to binding her with duct tape and burying her body, but he insisted the actual killing was done by Crystal.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the defense almost got a massive assist from the legal process itself. Despite the overwhelming narrative of guilt, there were severe procedural errors made during the investigation.
There were. The legal standards for evidence collection are rigid for a reason, and in this case, the judge was forced to throw out key pieces of physical evidence.
That must have been terrifying for the prosecution.
I'm sure it was. Because of missteps by law enforcement, issues likely relating to search warrants or chain of custody, the judge suppressed evidence that included Beverly's hair and the actual duct tape found in the trunk of Aaron's car. He also had to throw out some of the initial statements Aaron had made to the police during his interrogations.
I mean, as a prosecutor, watching physical evidence like duct tape from a kidnapper's trunk get suppressed must be agonizing. But the jury saw entirely through Aaron's alternate reality anyway.
Well, he did. The jury simply did not buy the story of a secret affair and an accidental death. The prosecution argued brilliantly that Aaron's defense strategy was not just a lie, but a continuation of his abuse.
Yeah, further victimizing her.
Exactly. The prosecutor argued he was victimizing Beverly and her family from beyond the grave by forcing her husband and children to sit in a courtroom and listen to him drag her professional and personal reputation through the mud.
It's just sickening.
It took the jury less than an hour of deliberation. In January 2016, Aaron Lewis was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Beverly Carter's murder was a devastating, senseless loss for her family. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it also forced an entire industry to reckon with a business model that practically guarantees this kind of vulnerability.
That is the core issue that the industry had to finally address. Gary Isom, the executive director of the Arkansas Real Estate Commission, pointed out that Beverly's murder was not an isolated anomaly.
Right, it had happened before.
Yes. There is a tendency to view women as the primary targets of these crimes, assuming physical vulnerability is the main factor. But the true vulnerability is the required isolation. In 2011, just a few years prior, a man named Jason Jackson was shot to death while showing a home in Little Rock.
And Jason Jackson's background completely destroys the myth that physical capability or situational awareness is enough to protect you. He wasn't just an agent, he was a 28-year-old decorated soldier who had survived a combat tour in Iraq.
He had literal military training.
Right. Yet he was killed because the fundamental nature of the job placed him alone in an empty house, turning his back on a stranger to walk them through a property.
It proves that situational awareness is completely voided by the requirement to accommodate the public. And this ties directly into a concept discussed by Beverly's son, Carl Carter Jr., in that webinar for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors.
I found this part so interesting.
It really is. He spoke about the danger of unconscious bias. When Beverly was communicating with the perpetrators and heard a woman's voice on the phone, Crystal playing the role of the relocating wife, Beverly immediately felt safer.
Right, because of that bias.
Exactly. It's an unconscious bias we all share. If a woman is involved in the inquiry, our brain categorizes it as a legitimate couple buying a home rather than a threat. Because of that bias, Beverly viewed the appointment as just another day in real estate. She was literally planning what to pick up for dinner while driving to meet her killers.
And that really speaks to the hustle culture of real estate. These agents aren't salaried employees clocking in at a secure office building with a security guard and HR oversight. They are independent contractors. They eat what they kill.
Yes, the pressure is immense.
If you get a call at 6 p.m. on a Friday from someone claiming to be an all-cash buyer, the industry culture dictates that you drop whatever you were doing and go meet them. Because if you hesitate, or if you ask for too many credentials up front, the client will just call the next agent on the list and you lose the commission that pays your mortgage.
And that hyper-competitive environment creates a systemic pressure to ignore red flags in pursuit of a life-changing deal, which is exactly why the safety protocols had to be mandated from the top down.
Right. It couldn't just be suggestions.
No, it couldn't just be about brokerages quietly telling their agents to be careful. It had to be regulated to change the culture. Following this tragedy, the Beverly Carter Foundation, which Carl Jr. helped establish, along with various state real estate commissions, pushed for sweeping structural changes. By 2015, safety training became a specific mandatory topic for continuing education requirements to even maintain a real estate license in many states.
So what this means for you, the listener, is that if you are entering the housing market today as a buyer, you're going to encounter a distinctly different process than you might have a decade ago.
Very different. Agents are now extensively trained to insist on meeting new clients in a neutral public location first.
Like their brokerage office or a busy coffee shop.
Exactly. Before ever agreeing to drive to a vacant property. And they are going to ask you for a copy of your driver's license or state ID to keep on file before they open a door for you.
And behind the scenes, the operational changes are just as rigorous, aren't they?
They are. Agents are now required by many brokerages to leave highly detailed itineraries at their office. They have to state exactly who they are meeting, the make and model of the client's car, the specific address, and the expected duration of the showing.
That's a huge shift.
It is. They're also implementing the buddy system for vacant, rural, or foreclosed properties, ensuring 2 agents are present instead of 1. And crucially, there is a massive new emphasis on auditing social media presence.
Which is so important. The social media aspect is the ultimate double-edged sword for independent professionals. Beverly was targeted because her public-facing Facebook page painted a picture of a wealthy, independent broker.
Right.
I mean, you are constantly told by marketing gurus that to build a brand, you must project massive success. You have to post about your closed deals, broadcast your location at open houses, and appear relentlessly approachable.
But that same carefully curated, highly visible image is exactly what criminals use to select their targets. It is a stark warning to aggressively audit the personal details we attach to our professional profiles.
Definitely. And while some consumers might find it annoying or invasive to have to provide a government ID just to look at a house they found online, it's vital to recognize that these new protocols aren't just red tape.
No, they are literal life-saving measures. They protect the agents from predators, but they also protect the consumers.
That's a great point.
Think about it. If you are a buyer walking through a vacant, foreclosed property that might have desperate squatters living in it, you directly benefit from your agent having a partner there or having your secure itinerary logged with a central office. The safety net protects everyone involved in the transaction.
To summarize our deep dive into the sources today, we explored a terrifying calculated crime born out of sheer greed and desperation. Two people who thought they found an easy, lucrative target ultimately robbed a family of a mother and a wife.
It's an absolute tragedy.
But the ripple effect of Beverly Carter's death forced the entire real estate industry to wake up. It forced them to stop normalizing the extreme vulnerabilities of their independent workforce and to fundamentally change how they conduct business with the public.
It tragically took the loss of a prominent, respected professional to expose the fatal flaw in the system. The expectation of constant, immediate access to a service worker can never supersede their fundamental right to personal safety.
Well said.
Yeah.
And that leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over, because this dynamic doesn't just apply to real estate agents showing houses. We live in a modern, hyper-connected gig economy where almost every professional, whether you are a freelance graphic designer, an independent consultant, a rideshare driver, or a small business owner, is told that to succeed, you must be highly visible.
You have to put yourself out there.
Exactly. You must be instantly accessible, you must be perpetually friendly online, and you must constantly broadcast your personal brand to attract clients. But how do we balance the absolute economic necessity of being public for our livelihood with the vital need to protect ourselves from the very people who might use that accessibility against us? It is a tightrope that independent workers are forced to walk every single day. So the next time you go to an open house and the agent politely asks to scan your driver's license before you cross the threshold, don't roll your eyes. Just remember the reality of the empty house and the person standing inside it.